Backward we go, forward we march. Best wishes from Ram Ratna International School.
Namaste everyone. Welcome to Adharshila Talks at RRIS. We will start in some time. We are getting participants join in, and we have our principal ma'am as well, and we have the introduction flashing on your screens for today's speaker. And our principal man, Dr. Jaya Parekh, will officially introduce once he joins in. I'll have a quick check and we'll be back with all of you in a short while.
Welcome to Adharshila Talks at RRIS. Adharshila is a platform for intellectuals converging from diverse spheres of knowledge to share novel, deep, and insightful ideas of intellect that fuel thought, conversation, and action of the minds of our audience. We believe in fostering ideas that are both highly relevant and radically different to enrich
Namaste.
the minds of our audiences.
Good
Join us.
afternoon. Namaste and welcome to our wonderful participants, the guests, our friends and well-wishers.
Good
Today,
afternoon.
good afternoon to one and all. I extend warm welcome to each one of you and my gratitude on behalf of Ramratna International School. This is Dr. Jaya Parekh, the principal of RRIS. This is the 30th Adharshila talk at RRIS. It is a great pleasure to have you all once again with us. We are waiting for Dr. Nair to connect with us. He just got logged off due to some internet issue. I hope Dr. Nair could join in again. Yes. So just for your information, Dr. Nair has joined in with the name KPS Director. KPS, that stands for Kerala Public School. So once he starts the session, you can pin him on KPS Director. So dear friends, today's session is going to be an interesting one, especially coming from the speaker who seems to be so passionate about the topic that he is going to speak on today. From the dust of history, Dr. Nair is going to present some specks of gems, the unsung heroes who have been forgotten and have not been popularized, have not been given that kind of credit for their valor and bravery and outstanding work that they deserved. How many of us can say that the history is exactly the same the way we have read it from the books? For the same point of time in history, your story could be different from my story. It could be differing based on the books that you read and that I read. So there is much more to what we all have come to know from books. And there are many reasons for it. There are people who have displayed these great qualities, but never got the share of the limelight as their other counterparts got, just because they never simply cared for that kind of popularity or publicity or credit. There are people who are glorified. On the other hand, we have people who are forgotten, the heroes who have been forgotten. It depends on many factors, like I said. It depends on which section of population they belong to. It also depends on who has written history, who has that pen in the hand, and whose point of view, whose narrative we are reading out or listening to. It's also the media which plays an important role, the politics and whatnot. Today, it's a great privilege and pleasure to be having Dr. Nair taking us all back in history, introducing those unsung heroes, those forgotten heroes whom we all need to know, we all need to feel proud of. So before I ask Dr. Nair to commence with his talk, I would like all of you to know who Dr. Nair is. He is a great friend of us, and he is a dentist, he is an educator, and he is the director of Kerala Public Schools. Dr. Nair is a dentist by profession. He has also been a trainer. He has been educating and training dentists across the eastern part of the country. As the director of Kerala Public Schools, he takes a keen interest in the overall development and education of children. An intrepid traveler, Dr. Nair has backpacked to various parts of Southeast Asia and Middle East. He is also a motivational speaker and a storyteller with a great sense of humor, and I can vouch for that. He conducts numerous lectures for students and teachers alike for various educational institutions. He is someone who tells you stories with a lot of passion. And now we are all ready to listen to those wonderful stories that he has got to share with us today. A very warm welcome, namaste, to my dear friend, Dr. Shrikant Nair, the speaker for the day. I also extend warm welcome and thanks to various gurus that have blessed us with their presence. That is Vijay ma'am, Ms. Lakshmi Kumarji, and there are many other educators who are with us today. So thanks to all of you, and over to you, Dr. Nair.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
I hope I'm audible. It's wonderful to be.
Yes.
It's
you are
wonderful
audible.
to be here. Wonderful to be here, and a lot of thanks to Madam Jaya over here. You know, without whose push and pull, I wouldn't have been here to present this small passion of mine that I want to present in front of you. Is my screen being seen?
So I would just like to remind all the participants, please pin on KPS Director. KPS short for Kerala Public School. And if you all can see his screen, please write yes in the chat box. And during the session, whatever thoughts that come to your mind or any questions that come to your mind, please feel free to type in the chat box. Over to you, Dr. Nair.
Is my first slide visible? Rediscovering our heroes, so that I can start from here.
No, this is not visible so far.
1 minute. Present now.
It takes a couple of seconds before it shows up.
The screen is not visible.
Yeah, no problem. Just wait for a few seconds.
Yeah,
and
now
Dr.
is
Nair,
it?
you are visible to us.
Is it visible now?
You are visible. No, not yet.
The slides not yet taken over?
No.
Just a minute.
Miss Papia Banerjee, please stop presenting. And Dr. Nair, could you adjust your camera a little? We are not able to see you fully, your full face.
Yeah, okay.
No, not yet.
Sir, I have your presentation that ma'am had emailed me.
Okay.
Fine, I could play that for you and use the presentation mode at my end.
Let me just try so that I can control it. If I'm not, then go ahead, please.
Sure, sir.
Pardon me? Yeah, I'm the co-host. Yeah, is it visible now?
Yes.
Yes, sir, visible. Yes, sir, visible.
Stop.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So, okay, thank you, thank you. I'm sorry for the trouble and sorry for the delay. Uh, the topic that that I'm going to talk to you about is rediscovering our heroes. And why do I say rediscovering our heroes? Because uh, a lot of us, or most of us, have forgotten, or we have been cursed to forget these heroes who have presented themselves, and because of whom our history stands the way it is. Not the history that we read, but the way our country has turned out today. Now, if you were to ask yourself, what does a dentist have to do with history? Who is he to talk about history? Is he even qualified to be talking about history? So this talk, I'm just a dental professional. I've been trained in the art and science of dentistry, but dentistry has nothing to do with what I'm presenting today. But it has everything to do with an Indian. Look at it the way an Indian will be looking at our history and asking a few questions. And that is what I want to present to you all, and probably set you thinking in the right direction. Is the history the way we have read? Is it correct? I do believe that all governments have their agendas, all political parties have their agendas, and they present a story that would suit their ends and their needs. But as the middle class, as teachers, as educators, we have to ask questions. Is this really that happened? Now, the few questions that I keep asking myself is, why do we lack patriotism? Do we lack patriotism? Are we not proud of our country? Are we not proud of our heritage? Where did we go wrong? And we might all say, oh, we are so proud of our country. But in reality, when you're alone at home and the national anthem plays, do you stand up? Or do you only stand up in a group? And there are a few who probably will not be standing up even in a. Is patriotism a dress that we only wear when you have jingoistic movies in Bollywood, or for an India-Pakistan cricket match? Or is it something that you wear every day? So how and where did we go wrong? Why is it that our children, and including us, a lot of us, lack sorely in the sense of patriotism? And probably the answer that comes to me is that somehow it has not been taught to us. Pride in our nation has not been inculcated into us by means of our stories, by means of our history. This is our country. These are our beliefs. But sadly, this is not our history, or at least not the it should be. So why so is this history not ours? Dr. Joseph Goebbels, who was the chief propaganda artist for the Nazis, he says, if you repeat a lie long enough, and it becomes a truth. And this lie sadly has been perpetrated to us for the past so many decades, or through the centuries, I would rather say, since the British took over. And a lie has been perpetrated to us that we've been at the receiving end of attacks from across the Himalayas throughout the centuries, right from the Sakas and the Huns and the Mongols and the Turks and the Afghans. They've all attacked, but the question is, if we've always been at the end of attacks and plunder and rape and pillage, then when did we actually grow as a country? When I look around myself and I see my ancient temples and architectures and the poems and the literature, I realize one thing, that the arts and sciences of a country can only flourish when there is peace and tranquility and prosperity in the kingdom. It cannot flourish. There is strife and war all around. So when you look all around and you see our heritage and our culture, and you realize it's such a rich one and a vibrant one, which meant there were more periods of peace and tranquility and growth and great kings and great kingdoms, and not so much of foreign invaders. But sadly, during Chandragupta Maurya and the Gupta dynasties, we know nothing about the Indian kings. Right after, I believe, the Gupta dynasty, we straight away jump into the attacks of the Afghans and the Islamic invasions. What happened in between? So this is an attempt to try and uncover, undust, rediscover stories from our history. Now, a few of you might disagree with my presentations. These thoughts are entirely my own, and you have every right to disagree with me, and you can question me later on. But I would like you to give me a patient ear. Now, this is something I discovered while I was going through the internet for a lot of things, and a small a cartoon, a caricature, which shows the harsh reality of today's education system, wherein sadly our history textbooks do not tell us about the Marathas or the Sikhs or the Dravidians, the Cholas and Pallavas and Pandavas, and the northeastern history is entirely oblivious to majority of us. Why? Why so? There's an African proverb that says that until the lion learns how to write, every story will glorify the hunter. So until as a nation, we tell our own stories the way we want our children to learn it and their children to learn it, the stories will always be from the invader's point of view, from the outsider point of view. And though we became independent, our story was mostly from the point of the view of the vanquished. When you ask yourself, why so? I might be wrong in this, but this is my theory purely. I mean, most of our early leaders and historians and teachers, independence, had a lot of left leanings, and they were inspired by socialism and communism. And they truly believed in this grand vision of a globalized union of people across countries, of a land without boundaries, and person equal. And if you actually believe it, it is true that communism was the first true idea of globalization. And they realized that somehow promoting nationalism was detrimental to the utopian idea of globalization. So what did they do? They taught us a history which did not teach us pride. And though we had been victorious and we had won our independence the hard way, after centuries of struggle, after centuries of subjugation, the history that was taught and taught to us was from the point of view of the vanquished. And that is the sad part. If you go throughout our history, our heroes and our victories are hidden from us, but our losses were amplified. Now, just to put things in perspective, we all know about the first Battle of Independence in 1857, but most of us probably have never heard of the naval mutiny of 1946. In the October of 1946, across naval ports of the British Indian Navy, you had Indian sailors who mutineered. But sadly, again, they did not get any major support from the so-called political Indian class. Again, I want to ask, we heard about the Indian National Army and Subhash Chandra Bose and his men. My question is, when India became independent, what happened to those soldiers? What happened to the naval mutinies of 1946? They mutinied in the October of 1946. We became independent in the August of 1997, less than 10 months away. And do you know, I'm yet to come across why none of them were taken into the Indian Armed Forces. Why? We all have heard about the debacle of 1962, which again was a political defeat, or the defeat of political will, not so much as a defeat of the Indian Army. But nobody talks to us about the Indian media, and the Indian historians don't chronicle the victory of 1967 in places of Nathula and Jetla, where General Sagat Singh stood his ground and ensured that the Sikkim and the Chicken Neck will remain with us and be strong. 1967 is not too far away. Most people, our parents would have been alive at that time. It's just a food for thought. Why is there selective presentation of losses and the erosion of our victories? So it is in this regard that I present 4 gems, forgotten gems, who might be remembered in certain pockets, geographical pockets or state pockets, but they have no national presence, sadly. And the 4 that I've selected today, there's Martand Varma, there's Rani Abakka, there's Lachit Borphukan, and Suhelde. And the last will be a small gem that I collected through my research. Now, we go to our hero number 1, Martanda Varma. The year was 1729, and he ascended to the throne of Travancore and set about expanding his kingdom. And those days, the largest maritime power was the Dutch East India Company. And it brought this king in direct confrontation with the Dutch East India Company. Now, if you see, this is the map which shows the areas of control by the Dutch East Indies then.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
Excuse me. Are you showing the presentation? Because I can't see the next slide. I can only see the quote by Dr. Joseph Goebbels.
Okay.
Have you moved on to the next
Yeah,
slide? Because I can't
I've
see.
moved on. I moved on. Yes.
I'm not able to see.
Yes.
I'm not able to see. If are others able to see?
Yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
others are good.
Yes. Yes.
Ma'am, maybe you can disconnect and reconnect again.
I'll
You
do
can
that.
see.
I'll do that. Very sorry to interrupt.
No worries. No worries.
Yes, ma'am.
Shall I continue?
Yes,
Hello.
please.
Okay. So this brought
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
in confrontation with the Dutch East India Company. And these areas that are presented in color are the areas that the Dutch East India Company had. And if you see India, they had started their expansions along the Indian coast. And one of the largest areas that they had next to us was Sri Lanka. So the governor of Ceylon, this gentleman, he sent messengers to Martanda Varma that you have to pass taxes. And Martanda Varma refused. And there was a verbal duel that happened. And Martanda Varma famously, stated that forget, let alone pay taxes to the Dutch East India Company and accept their supremacy. He was building a navy to attack Europe. And history has it that our governor, Gustav Wilhelm van Humhoff, got really angry and sent his fleet in 1740. The Dutch Armada hauled off the coast of Kolachal. Now, Kolachal is a small seaside town present in the Kanyakumari district today. And they started this bombardment of the Travancore. Now, once they bombarded and people had to run away from the city. Now, Kolachal is of a strategic importance. It is only 13 kilometers from his capital of Martanda Varma. And Dutch ensured a naval blockade of the kingdom's coast. And February 4th, 1741, they launched an amphibious assault, and they established, they built their fortifications around the port of Kolachal. And they stockpiled and prepared for the final assault. But luckily for us, and luckily for Martanda Varma, monsoon set in. And Martanda Varma was now aware that ships would find it increasingly difficult to come from either Indonesia or Malaysia to help the Dutch governor. So on May 27, 1741, Martanda Varma with his Kalari warriors laid siege and attacked. And the war lost it for quite a few months. And as luck would, when the luck favors the brave, what is called as a hot bullet hit the gunpowder stored in the Dutch fortifications, and all hell broke loose. People were injured there inside the fortifications. They didn't have fresh water, they didn't have food to eat, and so they finally had to surrender. Now, this is a beautiful image of a European power going in front of an Indian king. When I saw it for the first time, I was ecstatic. I was so happy. It's rarely seen in Indian history. We've always seen our princely states who bowed down and cowed down in front of the British. And here we had a small kingdom in Kerala and his ruler Martanda Varma, and the then most powerful empire, the Dutch East India Company, they had to bow in front of the Indian Empire. As they say, the rest was history. But then it was kept hidden from us. See, this is the sad state of our affairs. This is one pillar that commemorates the victory of Travancore army over the Dutch. That's it. That's all that is there. And very recently, you can see the picture on the left is what in such a dilapidated state the pillar was. Now there's been some beautification around it, but this is all that remains of that famous war in Kolachal. We move ahead to our hero number 2, or I call heroine number 2. Now, 1498, Vasco da Gama landed in Goa. Now, the Portuguese went about expanding their empire, and within a few decades had practically captured the entire western coast of India. You can see the map, and you can see from Daman and Diu and Surat right across Goa, Mangalore, Kannur, Calicut, Cochin, Tuticorin, Nagapattinam, right up to Hooghly and Chittagong were Portuguese ports. And they started dictating the export from India to the Arabs, the Persians, and the kings had to, because they had the strongest naval force then, after the Dutch, maybe a century or so after the Dutch. So all the rulers were paying the Portuguese, but only one dared defy them. And when the Portuguese sent their envoys to this kingdom, the small kingdom, the kingdom was ruled by a lady, by a queen. And she said, I will not pay any tribute to Portugal. And she was Rani Abakka Chauta. And she ruled from 1544 to 1640. 96 years, can you believe that? And this is where she ruled. A small part, a port town called Ullal, south of Mangalore. And Mangalore was under the Portuguese rule. And any attempt by Ullal to launch its ships would always was met by either destruction of the or they would hold the ships to ransom, or they were ship burnt. And she saw to it that enough was enough, and she started taking revenge, and she started repulsing every single attack by sheer courage and ingenuity. Once again, using guerrilla warfare very effectively, she used what was called by the Portuguese as fire arrows. And from the 40 ramparts of the cliffs, they would shoot down these flaming arrows into the anchored vessels, the Portuguese anchored vessels. And the Portuguese naval force was destroyed, and they had nothing but to accept defeat. And would you believe it, this loss of Portugal made headlines in Europe. European papers covered it. So much so that an Italian journalist came down to Ullal, to Mangalore, to interview Rani Abbakka. Now that is, can you imagine a time before internet, before television, before anything, people heard of the valor of this lady and the leadership of this lady. You know, I think whenever India has faced difficulty, it's our women folk, the powerful Nari Shakti that has shown the way through. Sadly, only know about Rani Lakshmibai because of the poems, of the folklore. If it was left to the historians, they would have wiped her memory out as well. We remember Lakshmibai. It's our folklore that has not so much our historians, who are more than happy to accept the European point of view of a battle or the result. Thoroughly vanquished, Portugal never looked back and would never attempt. And because of this defeat, other kingdoms slowly started revolting against the Portuguese. With time, Goa was the only big place that they had with them in India. So imagine the Indian
Hello, sir. We seem to have lost you.
Yes. Hello. Hello.
Yeah, hello. Yeah, we had just lost you for a few seconds, probably.
Hello.
Or maybe you were not speaking. Yeah, we can hear you now. Yes, sir, we can hear you. Hello, Dr. Nair.
I think he may be facing some connectivity issues.
Yeah, but he is still showing connected here. Dr. Nair.
Yeah. Am I audible
sir?
now?
Yes, now you're audible.
Yeah, I'm there. I'm there.
Okay, sure.
Okay.
Please carry on.
Okay.
We are all with you, and we are excited to hear about it. We are really amazed with the stories that you have shared. Please continue.
Thank you so very much. So when I say Rani Abbakka, there were 3 Rani Abbakkas: mother, daughter, and granddaughter. And are not very sure where one started and the other ended. So you need further historians and analysis to actually make out who did what. I'm sorry, somebody's phone is on, please.
Sir, I have paused them.
Okay, thank you so very much. Now we come to hero number 3. Now, the hero number 3 is not a king, but in fact, he's a general. Now, a lot of us tend to believe that the Mughals were removed by the British. But if you actually read history, it was the... Yes, ma'am.
Before we move on to the next hero, I think this
Yes.
is really interesting to share with all how genius of those queens who did not let the enemies understand how long, or what was the reason for such a long rule of the queen, because it is 3 generations who have ruled with the same name, which they did not realize. Am I right?
Ma'am, no, I cannot be very sure of that fact because historians will have to do research and find out.
Okay,
The,
great. But I
the
think
present, the history just records them as Rani Abakka, but there were actually
uh-huh,
3 Ranis.
right, three
So
different Ranis
further,
with the same name.
yes, yes, they were mother, daughter, and granddaughter.
Right. So I think there should be this angle also into their research.
Possibly, yes.
Thank you.
Because more studies need to be conducted to find out exact, chronicling of the rules of the Ranis.
Right. Got
So
it.
we move on.
Please continue.
We move on to the third the hero in our list,
Yes.
and we tend to believe that the Mughals were removed by the British, but it was the Marathas who started eroding their power in Delhi. And even before that, the first major defeat given to the Mughals, the Aurangzeb's army, was the Ahom rulers of Assam. And Aurangzeb's army was so badly defeated that they didn't venture into the northeast ever again. And he's our hero. His name is Lachit Borphukan. He was a phenomenal his much larger enemy, and the Mughals were so irritated with him. You know, at times they thought he was as pesky as a mosquito, but then this mosquito was biting them silly and bleeding them dry, and the Mughals could not understand what was happening because they had never come across an Indian, a native Indian army uh, who would attack like this. Because most Indian, native Indian armies and kings would attack head front. At times they'd be foolhardy and they would get destroyed. Now we have Lachit Borphukan, who was brave but used his brain as well. And the Aurangzeb's army was so angry with him, so they decided, and there were times when Lachit would keep quiet and not attack. So, in one of those periods when he was waiting for a moment to attack, that the Aurangzeb's army had a trick. They did a ploy. They sent a letter, which was which they conspired to have it caught by the spies of the Ahom rulers. And when the letter was read out in the kingdom, it was as if the Mughal general had written to Lachit Borphukan that why are you still fighting with us when we have already paid you the 1 lakh rupees that you so demanded. And since there was a lull in fighting at that time, because Lachit was waiting for a better time to attack, the king was surprised. The Mughals actually succeeded in driving a wedge between the king and the general. And the king actually thought that the general had sold themselves out, and he ordered Lachit to attack. Lachit attacked, and he got injured in the battle. But he again went back and he realized that the Mughal army and the Mughal navy was coming up the Brahmaputra from Dhaka. And it was a huge army, 30,000 infantry, 15,000 archers, 18,000, Turkish cavalry, and 1,000 cannons and a large flotilla of boats. And very, very smartly, Lachit Borphukan, he planned the battle in the narrowest part of the Brahmaputra, where only a few ships could come in at one time. And from the Nilachal hills and the hills surrounding the bank on where they were, they could rain down arrows and smash their cannons against the Mughals, while the swampy regions over here, the Turkish cavalry got stuck and they could not move. So using a lot of acute planning and bravery, Lachit Borphukan destroyed the entire Mughal navy and the army over there. So much so that they never dared to set foot into Assam again. Now, we might have forgotten Lachit Borphukan, but there are few who have not forgotten and still keep his memory alive. The best cadet of NDA gets the Lachit Borphukan gold medal. Imagine such a important, prestigious honorary prize is given to our finest cadet, and most of India probably will never hear about Lachit Borphukan. The 24th of November each year, the Assam government, Assamese celebrate Lachit Divas, and this is to commemorate the heroism of Lachit Borphukan in the Battle of Saraighat. Another piece of history which was kept away from us. Now we get into more interesting territory. Hero number 4. Now we all know that Mahmud Ghazni invaded India no less than 17 times between 1000 AD and 1025 AD. And Muhammad Ghori attacked India for the first time in 1191, was defeated 7 times by Prithviraj Singh Chauhan, and it's on the 8th time that he beat Prithviraj. And when you actually close your eyes and you think about it, you actually feel that Ghazni and Ghori came in quick succession. But if you actually see history, there was 174 years between Ghazni's last attack and Ghori coming in, and Ghori's first. So what happened? Was there no invasion for 174 years? Did the Afghans and the Turks suddenly say, we are done with India? Or was there some invasion? Now there was the invasion by Salar Masood in 1033 to 1035. Now Salar Masood, it is recorded in history. I'm not saying this, it's recorded and noted in history. He was a religious bigot. Once his uncle Mahmud Ghazni died, Salar Masood was his sister's son, and he was a general of the army. So he goes back to Ghazni, and from there he takes his army and comes back to India, and he tells the king that I will get back India to you, and I will spread our empire and Islam across India. And it is also recorded that when Ghazni attacked Somnath, it is Salar Masood who insisted his uncle to break the Shivlinga in Somnath. So all the way from Afghanistan, along with his Turkish army, Salar Masood comes in from Balochistan and Sindh and Punjab and Delhi and Meerut. And sadly, we had our history is littered with more than a few Jaichunds. There were too many Jaichunds, The ruler of Kannauj received him as a friend. And he said, my army is your army. So after resting and recuperating in Kannauj, he moved eastwards. And he coming towards Baraich, when he sought the ruins of a sun temple near a sacred reservoir called Suraj Kund. And he was appalled by this, and again he asked his historians to note down that in order to neutralize the evil spell of the material sun, a power of the spiritual sun of Islam, he said he was to destroy whatever was there and build a mosque and stay there. At the banks of the Ganga near Bharat, Salar Masood came to face with his nemesis, Suhail Dev. Suhail Dev is a largely forgotten hero, but he is now being resurrected in popular memory. We have a book by Amish now called Suhail Dev. And Suhail Dev is arguably one of the most underrated and forgotten rulers of India. He went on to destroy and defeat and kill to the last man the entire army of Salar Masood, including Salar Masood. But what is also known is that he managed to cobble up an alliance with entire kingdoms across the east and north, and even it is said that armies from the south of India crossed the Vindhyas and came to help him in this fight against the foreign invasion. And for the first time, you could say, probably a pan-Indian army, which was not an army of Bharaj or the King Bharaj. It was the first true Indian army defeated this Afghani, Arab, Persian, Turkish force. So much so that no single entity dared come to India for the next 200 odd years, because with the army destroyed, there was chaos back in their countries. People started warring to pick up kings over there, and nobody dared to come India for 2 centuries. Such was the defeat given to the invading forces. Every single person was annihilated, was killed. Now question is, what happened to Salar Masood? Now this can only happen in India. Salar Masood exists in India today. He continues on in the same place where he wanted to have a mosque built. He is remembered today as Ghazi Baba. The sad part is, we have an invader who's revered in our country as Ghazi Baba. And he's revered not just by Muslims alone, he's revered by Hindus and Muslims. And anybody who wants to a child, a son in those regions, go and apparently worship at the Dargah, and it is rumored that they are blessed with the son. Imagine if this is the destiny of Salar Masood. What is the destiny of Suhail Dev? The destiny of Suhail Dev is that he was forgotten till now. It's only now that he is being resurrected from the depths of Indian history. Now, if you would have seen the invitation that went to you for the Adarshila talks, I had said history is dynamic. It keeps changing. New chapters are added on to it every day. Now, how is history dynamic? I'll just give you a small incident, and we'll take this talk forward. Now, we all know Prithviraj Singh Chauhan. This is supposed to be a drawing of Prithviraj Singh Chauhan, one of the finest and the last native rulers of India. And Muhammad Ghori invaded 7 times. 7 times he was beaten by Prithviraj Singh Chauhan. And 7 times he forgave Ghori and sent him back. Now that is being, in my book, that is being stupid. Pardon my French. That is not being intelligent. And that is definitely not being brave. Now, just to go away from the talk, there's a very beautiful word, African word called Ilunga. I wish Prithviraj Singh Chauhan knew about this word called Ilunga. Ilunga is a person who's ready to forgive any abuse for the first time, to tolerate it a second time, but never a third time. Had Prithviraj Singh Chauhan been a Ilunga, Ghori would never have come a 4th time. And history, say, would have been different. Anyway, coming back to the story. But remember the word Ilunga. or the most, you could say the most complex word to be translated. Now, what happened next? Was he defeated in battle and killed the 8th time? If you were to believe our historians, he died in the battlefield. Or is it so? Now, let's take the story forward. This is the tomb of Ghori today, present day Afghanistan. Now again, if you remember Kandahar hijack. Now what does Kandahar hijack have to do with Muhammad Ghori, you'll ask? Excuse me. Now, Muhammad Ghori's mausoleum is very close to Kandahar. Now, we all know this gentleman, our late Foreign Minister Shri Jaswant Singh, who flew along with the terrorists to Kandahar to free the IC-814 aircraft. Now, when he comes back, he enumerates that there is this odd custom outside the tomb of Ghori, in a mud tomb. Anybody entering to pay respects to Muhammad Ghori first takes out his chappals and footwear and slams it on the tomb before entering the tomb to pay respects. And he was surprised to find out that tomb belonged to Prithviraj Singh Chauhan. Now the question that should arise is, if you are Muhammad Ghori and you have just defeated your greatest enemy, you killed him, would you plan such insult for him? Probably not, because the story didn't end over there. And that is the question: why would the descendants of Ghori go to the length of burying Prithviraj Singh Chauhan outside the gates of Muhammad Ghori's mausoleum? Why? The folklore in Ghori near Kandahar is that it is a punishment for the Indian king who killed Muhammad Ghori. Now, which Indian king killed Muhammad Ghori? So, when Prithviraj Singh Chauhan was defeated, he was taken to Ghazni and he was paraded in front of Muhammad Ghori. But what Muhammad Ghori didn't like was the fact that Prithviraj Singh Chauhan did not look down. And on being ordered to lower his stare, and he did not, Muhammad Ghori had Prithviraj Singh Chauhan's eyes burnt out with a hot iron rod. Now, the royal poet of Prithviraj Singh Chauhan was a guy, probably you would have heard, a poet called Chand Bardai. When Chand Bardai got to know about Prithviraj Singh's fate, he went to Ghazni and he went and met Muhammad Ghori, Shahabuddin Ghori, who was practicing his archery. And Chand Bardai tells Ghori that you are a great archer, but Prithviraj Singh Chauhan is even better. And he can, just on the hearing a gong, he can take an aim and pierce any target depending on the sound. So Ghori accepts the bet and he says, okay, we'll have Prithviraj Singh Chauhan display this great archery feat that you say. And if he doesn't succeed, I'll have your head cut off. So they form a plan in the dungeons. And Chand Bardai goes and tells Ghori that, because he's a king, he will not take an order from a common soldier. So when you give the order to command to shoot, he will shoot. And Gauri likes it immensely. And the next day, when the archery contest is happening, it is Gauri who asks or commands Prithviraj Singh Chauhan to shoot. And Prithviraj Singh Chauhan turns around and fires at Gauri, killing Gauri instantly. Legend also has it that Chand Bardai and Prithviraj Singh Chauhan stab each other, killing each other, that they are not caught alive by the enemy. And that is the reason why the descendants of Gauri decided to punish Prithviraj Singh Chauhan's mortal remains even after his death. That was the grave outside Muhammad Gauri's mausoleum. The end? Or is it the end? Now in comes Phulan Devi. Now Phulan Devi have to do with Prithviraj Singh Chauhan. Now she was jailed, she was exonerated, and she comes out of the jail of prison, and she's fought her elections. She's become an MP under the a ticket given by the Samajwadi Party. And this young boy, his name is Sher Singh Rana. Now his story is no less than any Bollywood potboiler. Now he, you could say he's a misguided youth. He hates what is happening to the country, where you have a dacoit, a criminal like Phulan Devi, who's been pardoned by the government because of caste politics. And he goes on to shoot and kill Phulan Devi, or he's accused of shooting rather. And he's jailed. And he's jailed in Tihar jail. And in Tihar jail, the year is 2001, and he gets of the Kandahar hijack and Jaswant Singh's statement regarding how Prithviraj Singh Chauhan's tomb is being disrespected by the Afghans over there. And he happens to be in a high security prison where you have a lot of Taliban terrorists also being kept. So he happens to talk to the Talibs over there, inquiring whether what he's heard is that correct or not. And the Talibs insult him, saying that, you know, they'll do this to the entire country and all places of worship again. It infuriates him to no end. And he hatches a plan. He hatches a plan, and then on the 17th of February 2004, he breaks out of jail. Now, I am not trying to glorify a criminal act over here. I'm just telling the story the way it is. 2004, he breaks out of jail. From Delhi, he goes to Ranchi, changes his name to Sanjay Gupta, picks up a passport in Ranchi, travels to Calcutta, from there to Dhaka. From Dhaka, he manages to go to Dubai, and from there, he goes to Afghanistan. Now, you don't understand 2004. 2001, we had the 9/11 bombings. 2004, you have war going on, major war going on in Afghanistan, with the Allied forces and the Taliban, hammering it out. And this young man travels to Afghanistan, manages to reach Ghazni, digs out the mortal remains of Prithviraj Singh Chauhan, comes back to India, cremates the remains of Prithviraj Singh Chauhan on the banks of Ganga. And then he says he turned himself up to the police. The police says they caught him. But either way, finally, the mortal remains of Prithviraj Singh Chauhan was laid to rest in India with all honor and dignity. These are just a few stories that I've managed to unearth and to tell you all. But there are so many more stories to be told. You know, the only question that comes to my mind is, how do we teach our children history and not teach them to hate? I can understand Ghazni coming to India, invading, breaking the temples, and Ghori coming and killing Prithviraj Singh Chauhan, and the entire history that happened after that. But what I can't understand is why our historians would hide this from us. If you want India to be great again, these stories need to come out. And these stories need to be told the way they happened. Otherwise, history will only remain his story. It will never be the true account of what has actually happened. But then, these stories have to be said nonetheless. I rest my case. I hope you had an interesting listen. Probably I've managed to enlighten a few minds. I want you all to go back, and your history teachers present here, I'm sure you might hate me for being turning the entire history topsy-turvy right now. I thank you all so very much. Thank you.
I think you have pleasantly surprised and intrigued everyone, including the history teachers here. And they have a lot to say against the historians at the moment. So anyway, Dr. Nair, it was so enlightening and intriguing listening to you, thrilling, at the same time such a feeling of sadness that why these gems were kept away from us, why their glory has been kept away from us.
Very true, very true. And I really urge our history teachers that, see, you all are more qualified than me when it comes to history. Go back, do some research, get out, bring these gems out so that our children learn our pride and history, so that India can truly be great again.
So
I realized one thing, just one moment. If ever, you would probably have noticed, if you ever want to have pin drop silence in a hall, just ask the present Indian citizens to stand up for the national anthem. Yeah. Suddenly, everybody goes quiet. And that is because we have not been given pride in our country. And for pride, we need our stories to be glorified. And I beg and pray to the history teachers, please go back and tell your students, forget what the boards tell us to say. We tell them our story. Or when you go back and tell your children, tell them the true stories of our great leaders and our great rulers. Because India was and is truly great. But the stories need to be great as well.
I think you have delivered a lot of lessons for the teachers as well through this indirectly. How a teacher has to be so passionate, how a teacher has to be a seeker. One who is interested in digging into the past will only be able to get this out. And how a detailed research goes into putting these stories to the audience. So I'm sure history teachers have taken those lessons also from you. That was an additional takeaway for all the teachers here. I would like, if any of the participants wish to speak, kindly unmute yourselves and share your thoughts. Are you fine with that, Dr. Nair?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
There was one question. There was one question by Mr. Amit Sharma. And if there are anybody else who would like to speak, please unmute yourselves.
Namaste, Dr. Nair. Thank you so much for the wonderful session. And somewhere I feel, I think what Sir pointed out is very important, that we have to be seekers. One thing that since Dr. Nair is from down south, there is an old myth that has been going on, and I have learned as a child in my history textbooks, the Aryan invasion theory. Now, as of today, Aryan invasion theory has been proven to be a hoax.
Wrong one. Yes.
uh,
Yes.
based on scientific evidence from genetics. So the
Very
genes
true.
of all the Southeast Asian residents, that includes people down south, that includes people like me from Rajasthan, from Pakistan, Afghanistan, all of Southeast Asia, we have got the same genes. So there were no
Very true.
and no
Very true.
Dravidians. And this thing is still going on in the textbooks. So, like Sir says, we teach the children, but then we also tell them that this is coming from the board and this is a fact as of now yet
Very
to be
true.
completed.
I'll tell you one thing, just to go away. I was lucky to have a very good history teacher, Mrs. Dorothy D'Souza, and she really inculcated the love for history in me. And one of the first places that I visited in my backpacking trip was I went to Cambodia to see Angkor Wat. Among other places, there's this place in Cambodia. It's called the Kabal Spian. When the ancient Hindus went to Cambodia, they realized in order to do prayers, they didn't have Ganga. So they found a unique method to create Ganga Jal. So on this small mountain stream in Cambodia, they carved 1,000 Shivlingas with the concept that when the water flows over the Shivlingas, the water becomes Ganga.
Wow.
And that's a place worthy of seeing. And I realized, our culture and our heritage has spread so far and wide, but sadly, again, it's not taught to us.
I agree with you, sir. Miss Lakshmi also would like to put a question. Lakshmi, over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much for this wonderful storytelling way of inspiring us with history. I'm one of those who are very restless about the way all over the world history gets so written by his story and the victors.
Very true.
And
Very
women really nearly don't have a space at all. And if at all there is, and women who nearly live the life of a man, this whole glorious bravado women. What I wanted to ask you is that if we look at the history, right now I'm coming from a CBSE context. We were just recently doing something with an Indologist. It is so much about first of all, the representation is a lot about the North, and this big glorious representation of the invaders. And then you have one sentence or one odd sentence of the South, the great Pandavas and the Cholas, and none of that even have been spoken about, the Mauryas, the golden time. Right. And it also probably, and when you read history about the central India or the Rajasthan, it's like a half a sentence.
Very true. Very true.
Expect education system to do the fairness, because we know that history is one of the biggest state's propaganda tool. One time we dumped with Hindu Rashtra history, and then if there is something else, the so-called pseudo-secular history we will be dumped with. So what should we do as educators I'm actually looking for, I don't mean a ready-made design template. If you have done something wherein we kind of accommodate the missed out history from which grade to which grade, and how you have done, like a project.
Ma'am, I'm yet to introduce this into the schools per se. This has been a passion of mine for some time now. As history teachers, I think we have to start to look beyond textbooks. You, by all account, make sure that the portions and the syllabus is complete. But for God's sake, for India's sake, for your children's sake, go beyond the textbooks and tell them what it truly is. Now, I'll give you an example. A few of you might remember ICSE Standard 9-10 syllabus. I remember as a student, it's surprised how it stuck in my mind. my teacher was teaching me, and she said, you know, these structures. She was describing the early early Islamic architecture in India, and she said this is a great example of Indo-Arabic architecture. So I asked my teacher, what do you mean by Indo-Arabic architecture? So she said, even though the rulers were Arabic or Afghani, the artisans who crafted the buildings were Indian, were natives. So they always added their own local flavor to the architecture, and that is why it's called Indo-Arabic architecture. And I was very happy with that explanation given to me. A few years back, I happened to be in Delhi, and I said I have to go see the Qutub Minar, and I go see the Qutub Minar, and I'm looking intricately at the carvings on the pillars and everything, and suddenly I see carvings of Shankh, Chakra, Gada, and lotuses and Kalash and everything. And I said, hold on a minute, something wrong somewhere. And I move ahead from there into another adjacent structure called the Quwat al-Islam Mosque. And outside the Quwat al-Islam Mosque, there's a plaque that says that, which was inscribed in Persian earlier, which has been translated in English by the British. And it was there when I went. It said 27 Hindu temples and Jain temples have been destroyed to make this this mosque, to show the the supremacy of Islam. See, I have nothing against the invaders then breaking down, trying to and pillage all that. But what I'm saying is, at least tell history the way it is. You could say that yes, Indian temples were destroyed to make these monuments. I don't know why do we have to sugarcoat history. It is when you sugarcoat history and certain sections feel left out that there is a lot of amendment that happens. If you were to tell truthfully, okay, this is what happened, we don't have to carry the animosity of 400 years to the present date. But when you try to hide it, and one group suddenly discovers it, and they say, hey, hold on, hang on, this is a lie, and this should not be so. And that is when animosity and enmity starts from there. We don't have to carry the painful memories of our history forward, but we should at least carry the memories forward. That is what I want to say.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Nair. We understand the past is in the past, but the past has to be told correctly, because
Yes,
there's a lot
yes,
of lessons that we carry forward from there.
Yes, yes.
Thanks for a wonderful question, Lakshmi ji. Is there anybody else who would like to speak?
Jaya,
Yes.
I'm also thinking like this, that, taking this, because this is one of the need of the hour in education system. And like he said very rightly, for the Indian, context, and, that we need to build the narrative in a very balanced way. Let's look at how we can take this to the next level.
We definitely need to have a discussion, I'm sure. And we all wish to bring that into our school curriculum. Whether it's a formal or an informal way, but it is to be introduced. I completely agree with you.
Yeah.
And when we see this in the light,
maybe you can bring in 10 schools to share how they are doing in terms of a concrete project format or something. See within a committee shared one idea, but you can explore for that.
that sounds ambitious. It sounds ambitious, but it would be an honor to do that. I will definitely try to arrange for such a program. If someone wants to speak. Yes, ma'am. Vijay, ma'am.
Yes, I also personally, I would like to be a part of this program that you all are planning, with all the teachers to share their inputs and go ahead. This is definitely something innovative, and I would definitely love if my teachers also gain something from this.
And I'll be pleased to be there.
he would be mentoring all of us. So we will
Yes,
let
yes.
me just coordinate with him, and
Yes,
we'll let
it was
all of you
indeed
know.
a very, very innovative session, and I personally feel that history is such a subject which is actually now taking a back seat because of lack of. Uh, I should not be blaming the teachers, but maybe the delivery is not in the right direction. I think if they get the direction, maybe things will work in a positive way. So
Yes,
I think
Vijayaji.
it will be made as interesting as the way he has put it. It will move a long.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Mr.
Vijayaji.
Nair, Dr. Nair. Thank you so much.
And thanks to your entire team of VDM International. I request Vijayam ma'am to share her thoughts. Vijayam ma'am.
Yeah.
Vijayam Karta ma'am, please.
Shrikant, that was wonderful. It was an amazing session as usual. I can't expect anything less
Thank you,
than
ma'am.
that from you. So
Thank
it was
you.
wonderful. I just had a thought which I had put it in the chat box, but then Jaya said share, so I'm just sharing. I said it will be, see, it's so difficult to now rewrite the history textbook. That is not in our hands. We can't do it. We don't have a control over it. What we can do is, can we have from standard 6 onwards, 6 to 8, at least 6 to 9, can we, every year, can we ask our students to do a small project, maybe 2-3 pages, not 10-15 pages, 2-3 pages on an unsung hero. And the class should be allowed to select whomever she wants, and then the teacher should go through the list and then ask them to do this project. So every year they may come to know about maybe 30-40 heroes, and then they can have that project should be with some reflective questions, like, what is that which is fascinating about this person, or what are the lessons which we can learn from this person. The questions can be different. So I was thinking this can be a good project, for schools, and that will help children to inculcate an interest in history too. Because most of the teachers, even I know teachers saying this to the children, history is a boring subject. I know teachers. So even many students also feel history is very boring. There is no need to learn history. So it can will have multiple benefits. That's what I thought of sharing. Thank you so much.
Thank you for these wonderful ideas, Vijay ma'am. And also when I see it in the light of the new education policy, which talks of having activities from grade 6 to 8 under the banner of Ek Bharat Shresth Bharat, it also emphasizes on bringing an awareness for the languages of the various parts of India. So I think within the program of Ek Bharat Shresth Bharat, this is one of the projects that can be taken up. And we will definitely try to do that. Thank you so much for always having such brilliant thoughts and sharing them with us.
Thank you, Jaya.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Would anyone like to?
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, I'm Ranjini. Am I audible?
Yes,
Yep, ma'am.
Ranjini
Please
ji,
go ahead.
you have contributed a lot through your comments.
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
I know that. So, sir, good evening, sir. Good evening, Vijayam ma'am. Good evening, all of you. I think Dekho Bharat is a new Bharat Dekho is a scheme which Indian government for the tourism has brought. Dekho Apna Desh. So that's one, and there is a Dekho Apna Desh pledge also. And there are places which are highlighted, which were offbeat and all. So even though the tombs and places like this may belong to a Mughal ruler or an emperor who has invaded us, but from a point of architecture, from a point of building, the beauty of the building, I think we must take this pledge to be a part of Dekho Bharat for the next 1 year when things go easy on us. So that's something which I wanted to contribute.
It is a wonderful information, ma'am, about Dekho Apna Desh and the pledge.
And this is as fresh as 2020. Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. I think Dr. Nair has lost his connection. Is he here?
Jaya, one more sentence can I add?
Yes, ma'am, please.
Yeah. So this is that Ek Bharat Shresth Bharat is also a good initiative. We can just look at. It's a wonderful
Yes, ma'am.
initiative where the government wants schools from different regions to, work together, collaborate, etc. So that can be a wonderful thing. For example, a school from Maharashtra learning about the heroes of Manipur, or Sikkim, or and
Absolutely.
the same way they learning, maybe we learning something from the south. So that is what they
Absolutely.
expect. So that's a beautiful initiative which we can all look at.
So, ma'am, what I
Yeah.
feel, as all have expressed their interest here, some of the educators here, we can organize an Adharshila talk on the ideas that can be explored under the Ek Bharat Shresth Bharat initiative.
That's
Maybe we can
wonderful.
do it
That would
under
be
Adharshila
amazing.
talk itself as a panel
Yeah.
discussion on the ideas to be proposed. It would help all the educators across the country. Thank you. And
Yeah.
Dr. Nair, you have been responsible for invoking these strong emotions in all of us. It is only
Thank you so
possible
very
when
much.
a person is so passionate. And your
Thank you so very
storytelling,
much.
please continue with it. Keep enlightening us with these wonderful stories. With all the best wishes and regards, I now allow you to, carry on with your regular routine. I know you are a very, very busy educator, educationist, and a doctor. So
Thank you so
God
very
bless you
much.
and all the best.
Thank you so very much. Been a pleasure, on. I just hope that you can take something from here and pass the spark on to other people as well. Thank you so very much.
Thanks for
So one of
accepting
the
my
most
invitation.
wonderful
Thank you.
section. Applause for you.
Thank
And
you,
I'm
sir.
blessed to be surrounded by such friends, such passionate educators, and who are always ready to